Other-Terrestrial, Season 1, Episode 2, Vitriol, by Nolan Conray.
Computers now have primary control.
As the captain went off with the governor, Dr. Logos at his side, Pyrrha followed the line of the rest of the crew as they moved through customs. It was more of a formality than anything. It was clear that the colonists wanted to give a good impression, though this place had seemingly not elected to join back with Earth since zero drives had been created, either collectively or through the sapient union. Most such colonies were still keen to maintain friendly relations. Trade and the movement of peoples could be a great boon for them. Each person ahead of her was being scanned and processed briefly, and then handed something. It looked like some sort of text printed on sheets of paper bundled together. It was a very archaic way of transporting information, but some humans seemed to find them meaningful in a cultural sense, and she could understand that. Pyrrha watched as each of the children of Executive Officer Early were given one. They seemed quite excited, probably for the novelty. Science Officer Sen stepped up next. The official seemed somewhat flabbergasted about how to scan him. Most scanners will detect decentralized nervous system. This is very normal for me, he helpfully explained. I am not a singular entity, but a macro entity of nearly 100 small polyps. Pyrrha tried not to laugh as a large, almost goofy smiling face shone off his space screen. She respected the science officer, but his electronic face was ridiculous at times. Ah, very well, Sens, the bureaucrat said, frowning and looking troubled. Commander, if you please, the Kroll replied. I am here in an official capacity. If you say so, the man said. Your visa is good for 14 days, no more. He jerked his head off to the side to indicate Sen should move on. After a moment of hesitation, the science officer did so. Pyrrha stepped up next. The man gave her a scowl and waved the scanner wand over her. He frowned at the results. Your visa is good for 14 days, no more, he said shortly. On your way. She stepped on and passed the man giving out the booklets. Absently, she extended her hand, but the man looked suddenly quite uncomfortable. I'm not allowed to give you a book, he finally said. Oh, she replied, surprised. All right. Stepping on, she noticed that he gave one to Alexander. What was that about? He muttered, catching up to her. He told me my visa could be renewed after 14 days. Did he? She asked. Yeah, and why wouldn't he give you a booklet? He held his up, and she saw that the cover was something about the glory of the dawn. Sens came over, nodding. May I see your booklet, Alexander? I admit, I have an interest in the supernatural beliefs of other species. That's fine by me. I'm not really interested in their religion. He handed it over. But do you have any idea why they didn't give one to you or Pyrrha? Treaties between species in the sapient union, he replied absently, thumbing through the book. There have historically been incidents of what we might call overly zealous attempts at conversion between some species. Now it is very standard to place very strict limits on evangelization. And even though they're not in the SU, trade agreements always include this clause. Otherwise, it can cause very messy relations. He continued to look through the booklet. In addition, it seems the faith of New Begonia is very human-centric. He looked up, his electronic face showing a wry smile. It seems you and I cannot go to heaven, Pyrrha. A pity, she replied dryly. Alexander was looking at her, his expression bothered. She patted him on the arm, but then noticed that the bureaucrats were watching them. Their expressions did not look friendly. I think we should move on, she suggested. Sens must have noticed as well. I believe you are correct, he said, giving Alexander back the booklet. Good day, Lieutenant. Alexander. With a stiff semi-bow, Sens headed away. Well, perhaps we should go see if there's a museum, Alexander said, forcing a smile. She knew he felt bothered on her behalf, but she didn't feel particularly bothered by being excluded from the weird human religion club, even if their magic friend had wanted to include her kind. That sounds great, she said, giving him a smile. Governor Grennis's brow furrowed. This is a very strange request you have made of me, Captain. Brooks smiled, hoping to set the man at ease. I mean no disrespect, of course. We are not here to steal your colonists. Only ask if this particular individual would be interested in joining us. That is not the issue, the man replied brusquely. What you describe is, well, we've heard of such mutations, but I always took them to be spacers' tales. Humans touched by something unnatural? It's disturbing to comprehend. The man's face went into taut lines. And you believe we are hiding such an individual here? Hiding? Brooks asked. That is not our angle. Yet you're accusing us of producing an individual with this mutation. The man's face was still taut, anger roiling under the surface. We may have left the home system long ago, but we have long memories, Captain. We recall the prejudice most had against us, against our beliefs. Even then you decried us as insane, defective. Brooks kept himself calm. No one is making that claim here, Governor. Your system is not the only place to have people with this trait appear. There is no shame in it, but for whatever reason, it only seems to appear in systems on the frontier with relatively small populations. The governor did not look in the slightest appeased. Well, I assure you, Captain Brooks, we have no such individual like that here, he said. Brooks nodded. Very well. It is unfortunate to learn this, but I would like, if you are still willing, to spend some time at your colony. If there are misunderstandings between us, then this may be the best way to bridge those problems. The governor's face softened ever so slightly. Brooks took it as a good sign. Your visas are good for 14 days. I will not renege on that. I do not expect officers of the Sapient Union to cause trouble in my colony. The only special rule you must adhere to is to respect our beliefs. We will do so, Governor, Brooks promised. Leaving the governor's office, Brooks saw Dr. Logus waiting for him. The man looked calm, almost serene. Brooks gestured for him to follow and headed for the exit. Dr. Logus did not ask him how the interview had gone, and Brooks did not offer anything. It was all too likely they would be overheard here, even if unintentionally. As they neared the doors to the general colony, a man was waiting. He wore a ceremonial collar over his standard uniform and held up a hand for Brooks to stop. The captain warily wondered if this was some sort of inspection or check, to try and impress upon them the governor's power. But the man had his own calm and serene smile that drew trust. May I speak with you a moment, Captain? He asked. Brooks gave him a polite nod, and the man continued. I hope that Governor Grennis did not give you the wrong idea about us, Captain. He is an admirable man, but he is very protective of our colony. Our believers have much concern about outside influence weakening or disrupting our expressions of faith. Brooks nodded. I can understand that. I hope to make clear that we do have no intention of causing harm to your colony, however. Of course, the man agreed. But attention and effect can be separate things. Brooks noted that the fear of outside contact causing change just by its mere existence was an ancient tool of control. Sometimes it was a valid fear, in cases of extreme power imbalance, which was something of the case here. The Sapient Union consisted of over a dozen species across thousands of systems. Let us walk together. the man continued, opening the doors. Very well. The man led them down the steps outside. Like much of the rest of the colony, they were made of compressed regolith. The material may have been common, but it was used with more skill and artistry than elsewhere, giving it a regal appearance. The administration building was in a style that was reminiscent of old terrestrial capitals. A large hollow had been carved into the moon, giving it an open feeling that the rest of the colony lacked. A dome and tower in the center gave it a quiet dignity, and the door was flanked by more pillars of compressed regolith. The steps led to a small but pleasant garden, and the men slowed their stroll to enjoy it. Humanoid figures in throes of religious passion and fervor lined the area. Pardon, but may I ask your name? Dr. Logus asked. You surely know the captain, and I am Dr. Arn Logus. Certainly. I am Reverend Yam Hallis. I minister to our flock and help guide our people. The man offered his hand, and both Brooks and Logus took it. As I say, the governor means no ill, but he is in a position that forces him to be cautious, Hallis continued. However, that does not mean he is wholly unwilling to help you. I understand that you seek an individual who has an unusual burden to bear. Brooks felt his curiosity piqued. Was the Reverend really working at the governor's behest, or was he simply trying to smooth over a potential problem on his own? You could phrase it that way, Brooks replied. What can you tell me about such an individual? The man smiled, but it was sad. Only that their burden is a difficult one, and that they are not here on New Begonia. So as not to be of any help, Brooks thought. That is unfortunate to hear, in both senses. If they exist, we could potentially help them. I believe you mean that, the Reverend said. I am not hostile to your ideals, Captain. I believe that your people are not truly lost, only have yet to find your exact path. That is why I will tell you that I have heard of such an individual who lives within the system. Brooks was not sure how to interpret that. Do they live isolated from the colony? It wasn't unheard of for individuals to live alone in space. Some people just wanted to be solitary. But it was a harder and more dangerous life for them in space than it had ever been for those who went to the wilderness alone back in Earth's history. The void had no mercy or room for error. You could say that, the Reverend said, but it requires some explanation. I am certain you are aware that our colony began under the guidance of our first prophet, Ted Koren. All of this is due to him and the grace of the Lord of Dawn. The man gestured to the garden and buildings beyond. One day we shall terraform Hope's Dawn itself and recreate the earth as it was in the days of paradise. Brooks noticed that Dr. Logus seemed fascinated. He doubted it was with curiosity of their religion, but out of sheer interest in the Reverend's psychology. Our arrival was difficult, however, Captain. We had sent production machines ahead of us, but they encountered unexpected problems that delayed them. 300,000 of us first left Earth, but nearly 2 million arrived. A trip of 400 years can have unpredictable changes in population. But what had been built was for only half that number. Times were hard here at first. Many considered it to be a test of our Lord, but not all felt that way. A pang of sorrow went through Brooks. While technology could allow beings to settle worlds and moons that were incredibly hostile, the scale of them meant that if small problems were allowed to fester, then they could grow exponentially. It was a reason the Sapient Union strongly advised prospective colonists to be officially sanctioned. The resources of fully developed systems were needed to help things go as smoothly as possible. But this was an unchartered colony. They had had the option of being chartered, but he knew that Ted Koren had refused to accept the help of the Sol government. He did not give voice to that thought, however, and allowed the Reverend to continue. After Ted Koren passed, his son took his name as his surname, Vel Teed. Vel was a wise leader, and in some ways so was his son. But Ban Teed began to feel that leadership should not be due to wisdom, but heredity. Though his father disagreed, Ban attempted to put his son into power against the general will, and a schism appeared in our colony. The Reverend shook his head sadly. We were fortunate to avert civil war. Ban and his followers were stopped, but the split had still occurred, and Ban left with those who agreed with him. They were unhappy, to say the least. And so they formed a new colony in this system? Brooks asked. Yes, on the largest moon of the first gas giant in this system, they founded a new colony that they named Vitriol. Dr. Logos arched an eyebrow. That sounds as if they were quite upset. Oh, they were. But we are grateful that there was no outbreak of general violence. Brooks stopped walking, turning to face the Reverend. The man mirrored him. I am sorry for those difficulties your colony has faced. Do you believe that it is in Vitriol that this person we are looking for can be found? It is likely, the Reverend said. There is a small dash gate that exists at the second Lagrange point around Hope's Dawn. Though relations remain somewhat strained, we do trade with Vitriol. If you take that gate, you should have no problem finding them. I will warn you, however, that they are less welcoming to outsiders than we are. Brooks nodded. Thank you, Reverend. Your assistance is very much appreciated. I'm in your debt. If we can assist you or your colony, we would be glad to do what we can. The Reverend smiled, but this time it was thin, tight-lipped. There is something you can do for us, Captain. You can leave quickly. Governor Grennis felt almost too nervous for words. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me, he said. It was the second time he'd thanked the being before him. Ambassador Kell merely stared at him, not acknowledging it this time. Why did you wish to meet? He asked instead. You have no idea the meaning it has for us, Grennis continued. I was terrified upon meeting you, you know. I do, Kell replied. Grennis laughed. Of course a messenger of the Lord of Dawn would know. You see right through me, don't you? Kell turned his head at a quizzical angle. In a sense. Then it is true, Grennis asked. You will have to be specific, Kell replied. You are an angel of the Lord of Dawn. We always knew you would come, and Korn said you would come to us here. I am so sorry that we have not yet terraformed Hope's Dawn, but I promise you that we have never lost faith in the great message. The man continued to speak, and Kell observed passively. His lack of reaction bothered Grennis, and he continued to profess his devotion to his faith. Please, all that I ask is that you tell me what the Lord of Dawn wishes for us to do. If I may ask that. You may ask what you please, Kell said, but I am not what you are waiting for. Grennis felt the blood drain from his face. What? You believe I am an angel. This is incorrect. I am a Shoggoth. But surely you are created by the Lord of Dawn, the man asked. All life is his creation, and you are a truly unique life that he promised would come to us. Kell continued to regard him. I do not know a Lord of Dawn, Kell replied. My creators are gone now, and I feel no sorrow for their passing. Grennis felt a heat rising in his face. He'd been certain when he'd learned of the Shoggoths, and that one was here, that this was the moment he'd waited for. He'd waited up nights since the first news of their existence had trickled out here, weeks ago. Waiting for a sign, feeling terror for those moments of lapses in his faith. Every mistake he knew would be viewed under a lens by the Lord of Dawn who could uncover all. And this was not the messenger? He wondered if it was a test. I am faithful, he said. If you are truly not what I believe, then perhaps I am to be the shepherd and your people the flock. Do you think, Ambassador, that they would wish to join us? We can show you how you fit into the Lord of Dawn's universe, your place in it. I can assure you that none of my kind would be interested, the ambassador replied. Your religion holds nothing for us, and we see far too much to find it of value. The governor's chest heaved and his face burned. Get out, he said, barely restraining his anger. Kell looked at him for a moment. He had barely an expression, but there was a hint of contempt. A dash gate, Early echoed. Well, the Hurricane is fit to travel through them, but I can't say I'm thrilled at the prospect. I'm not any happier, Brooks replied. After returning to the shuttle, Brooks had sent out a return signal to everyone with them. He had no doubt that it would have been safe for them to stay out their 14-day visas here, but they were here with a purpose, and he did not want to push the patience of the colonists. One day, they might actually feel ready to engage with the Sapient Union. In the cockpit of the shuttle, he had gathered Early, Logus, and Kell, or the latter had, at least, decided to join them. "What is the issue with dash gates?" Dr. Logus asked. "They're in standard use within planetary systems. They're all over the home system." "Yes, but those were very well constructed and maintained gates," Early explained. "In frontier systems, these things tend to be of lower quality and in poor repair. On top of that, the tech is just rougher around the edges than a zero drive." "I have not actually traveled in one," Kell noted. "I left Earth in a special ship that was allowed the use of a zero drive further in the system." Early took a deep breath. "Likely because some people react poorly to dash gates, and Command did not want to risk you getting sick so early in our coexistence, Ambassador." Kell frowned. "Shoggoths do not get sick." "Of course," Early noted dryly. "But for explanation's sake, for safety reasons, dash gates don't use a proper hole into zero space, but sort of slide a ship halfway between that and real space. It works better for short distances like those within a system, but it's energy wasteful and can be very bumpy." "I am interested to try it," Kell said. Brooks looked to his executive commander. "Early, while everyone gets settled in, check the colony records for maintenance on the dash gate. Get an idea of how safe it is. If you deem it acceptable, then in 1 hour we'll make liftoff and head for the second colony." "Vitriol," Early muttered. "Sounds like a fantastic place." A small smile that was uncomfortable to look at crossed Kell's face. "I find this whole story quite amusing," he admitted. The dash gate was functional. Both the Hurricane's onboard computer and Early's own calculations determined it to be well within safety margins. But that didn't mean it was a pleasant trip. The gate was small, one of the advantages of a dash gate, and the ship rattled through nearly the entire duration of the 4-hour trip. Brooks knew it had to be hardest on Sens, with each individual polyp of his body being jostled the entire way and checked in on him. But the science officer was his typical cheerful self. "It's an interesting sensation," he admitted. Yet the smile on his screen looked forced. When they were 10 minutes from re-entering normal space, Brooks went to the cockpit. The door opened obligingly for him when he approached, and a child came tumbling out, literally doing a slow end-over-end in the zero-G, a high-pitched shriek on her tongue. Brooks knew Early's daughters, of course, and helped catch Persis before she hit a wall. Her shriek had turned to giggles, and Hannah floated out, holding what appeared to be a sensor wand as a sword. "Now I am victorious!" "Hello, Captain Brooks," the girl said, switching tone and manners in an instant. She ducked the wand behind her back. With her free hand, she gave him a salute. "Hello, Captain Brooks," Persis said, still fighting her laughter. "Hello, girls," the captain replied, struggling to keep his own smile in check. "I need you to go on back to your cabin. We're going to be coming out soon, and I'm going to have to talk to some people I expect to be both friendly and boring." "Can I watch if I'm quiet?" Hannah asked. "I'll raise my hand if I have a question," she added. Early sat up and spoke before Brooks could answer. "Captain," he said, getting up from the chair. The fact that he hadn't spoken up yet made Brooks wonder if he'd actually fallen asleep while the two were playing. It might be the reason Hannah had been able to get the delicate sensor in the first place. "Where did you find that?" Early asked her, still holding the sensor wand. "Did it float off the equipment rack with all the rattling?" Yeah, it did," Hannah said, daintily handing it to her father. Early glanced at Brooks, looking quizzical. Hannah also looked at him, alarmed. He knew, of course, that she had been using it as a toy. Brooks gave a shrug and a smile back to Early. "She was picking it up when I came in. It seems she had quite a good sense of how valuable and breakable it is." "Oh, good," Early said. "Okay, girls, time to go back to your cabin." "I wanted to stay, though. Captain, can I stay?" Hannah asked. Brooks smiled to her, but didn't dismiss the idea immediately. For a city ship, having its younger populace take an interest in how things work was something they both hoped for and cultivated. This was not the most drastic of circumstances. On a smaller and younger colony like this, it was likely they would be able to talk to the governor initially via signals rather than a face-to-face after landing. It was a place outside the Sapient Union, too. Sometimes it was a mistake to only let the up-and-coming see how things worked internally. It would mean they were caught flat-footed when they had to deal with outside officials. "I'm all right with it," he decided. "Executive Commander, how do you feel about it?" "So long as you stay quiet, Hannah, you can stay." I want to stay too, Persis interjected quickly. Early was calm but firm. No, Persis. You can sit in another time, but this time Hannah gets to. No pouting. This is not a game. This is very serious. Now go back to the cabin. Next time? She asked sadly. I can't promise next time, but eventually, yes, Early added. The girl left slowly, but did go. Early confirmed via sensors that she had, in fact, returned to her room, while Brooks moved to sit in the co-pilot's chair. Hannah sat down on a stool in the corner and strapped herself down, watching with eager eyes. Early flipped on the intercom. Attention, we will be exiting the dash in approximately 30 seconds. There is likely to be turbulence, so everyone please strap in. Checking that Hannah did so, and that the sensors confirmed everyone else had, save Kel, Early watched the seconds tick down. Unlike a proper zero gate, there was no exit to catch them. It was more like being thrown, and the ship itself would have to engage a tankionic braking system that would cause them to shed the colossal amounts of energy they had accumulated. Simple physics rendered it impossible to be moving faster than light and exist in their own dimension. No being could possibly have manually exited such a jump. The timing was so precise, the speed so great, that the most sensitive computers possible still found it taxing. Early simply watched the numbers tick down, and they felt the ship begin rattling with extra fervor. The exit was rougher even than the journey, and they were all thrown forward. Such exits were hard enough to cause injuries, and the hurricane's own dampeners strained to keep it under control. Brooks felt himself thrown forward, held back only by his restraints. The whole ship lurched, then became still. Ow, Hannah said flatly. Could that have been any bumpier, Dad? She asked. Shush, you're fine, Early said, checking her readouts while Brooks suppressed his smile. Everyone seems fine, Brooks added, checking the rest of the crew. Did Kel fall? Early asked. He sounded a bit hopeful. No, barely even twitched according to this. Early sighed. Someday the ambassador's going to be in a genuinely rough exit and regret not strapping in. Ahead of them, a massive and glorious gas giant loomed. It was vaguely like Jupiter, but over twice the mass and far deeper in color. Around it, moons nearly as large as Earth orbited. Of those they could see, most were varied and extremely volatile. The tidal forces of the massive planet pulled them to and fro with each orbit, keeping their insides molten and active. But one of the smaller moons seemed relatively stable internally. It was an ice ball smaller than Earth's moon with a rocky core, certainly rich in the materials needed for a growing colony. Heat readings from the moon broadcasted the presence of the settlement. Even embedded in ice, there was no way to hide the infrared energy of colony-scale fusion reactors. We're in range, Hurley noted. Getting an automatic query, making our request. A few moments passed. Getting reluctant permission to talk to the governor. It's your show, Captain. Brooks joined the channel. Greetings, Governor. This is Captain Mayor Ian Brooks. I have come trying to find a specific person who... You came from Teed? The male voice came back. There was a visual channel, but the man wasn't using it. Teed? Brooks asked. We just took the dash gate from New Begonia. Teed, the man said. Those bastards lied to you, Captain. They're all liars and sneak thieves. Lied to me about what? He asked. Anything. Everything. They're a blight. A stain on the memory of Corin Teed. Early gave him a confused glance, but Brooks kept his face a pleasant mask. He was broadcasting in the visual band, even if the governor wasn't. I see. That is unfortunate to hear, Governor. However, I still have my mission. Perhaps you'd be able to assist me in that. Why? The voice insisted. You've already been poisoned by them. I know it. It's all part of their plan to destroy Teed's legacy and set themselves up as no better than those decadent horse sons on the homeworld. Brooks let his annoyance show. Governor, if you have this much of a grievance with the other colony, whatever it may be called, I suggest you speak to them about it. I am not here on their behalf. No, the voice challenged. We know they've been in negotiation to join your union of false prophets, so you can do their dirty work for them. No, Governor, they have not. They did not even want us to stay any longer than necessary, as a matter of fact. We spent less than 8 hours at the colony, far too little to work out any sort of accord. There was a long silence, and Brooks had a gut feeling that prompted him to continue on. However, if you wish to speak to one of our diplomats to be assured that we have not entered into any accords with the colony, or to seek assistance in arbitrating your differences, Then I will be happy to summon one who could arrive in a week or so. Silence. Finally, a reply came. That won't be necessary. Very well, Governor. Now there is a person I am seeking. They are an unusual individual with strange gifts. I know who you mean, the governor said. We threw her out. Brooks felt his heart beat faster. Do you mean to tell me that you spaced this individual? No, the voice came back. It was reproachful, if anything. They're with the other traitors. Not the ones at Teed, the ones at New Vitriol. Brooks frowned. Another colony? The cowards fled out further from the system. The governor sneered. All a bunch of mutants and rejects who didn't want to keep with the true teachings of the Dawn. As unfortunate as that sounds, I need to find this individual. Where can I find New Vitriol? There was a pause again. We can send you the data, and you can have permission to use our dash gate. On one condition, Captain. What is it? Tell them to go to hell. The connection was severed and Brooks looked to Early. The two men just stared at each other for a moment when Hannah spoke. He was so rude, she said. And what's a horse on? Nothing, Early said immediately. Forget it. Now go back to your cabin, if you will. The captain and I have work to do. All right, she said, pushing out her stool to float towards the door. And if you don't know, then I'll go look it up. After she left, Early groaned. Shouldn't have let her stay. Well, who could have known they'd be this crazy out here, Brooks replied. I've heard of colonies getting insular and unhealthy, but this is a severe case. At least they don't seem actively hostile. I'm keeping all the sensors in the defense grid ready just in case, Early muttered. They did send us information, though. It seems their jump gate is on a nearby orbital path, lagging behind their colony a little. It'll be around to us in about 6 hours. The dash, though, that looks like it's going to be another 18. I hope it's a little better maintained. Brooks grimaced. All right. Then let's get some rest and hop it in a few hours. The faster we get out of this system, the better. You go ahead and sleep through, Early told him. I'll take a watch, then get Sens to relieve me. You can take the shift after him. Nodding, Brooks got up and stretched. All right, then. See you later.